Today's video is sponsored by CleanMyMac X, your Mac as good as new. Hey, it's Chris. People love to talk about MacBook Pro versus iPad Pro, like you had to choose one or the other. But I feel like if we're having a conversation about pro tools, not the software, but just like pro equipment, then maybe we need to start talking about using these two devices together and how they can complement each other. Now, for the non-pros out there, then this either or conversation makes a lot of sense, and it's completely understandable because having both the MacBook Pro and the iPad Pro may indeed be overkill. And for that matter, having a non-pro Mac or a non-pro iPad may do the trick for most of the people out there. But I kid you not though, for the stuff that I'm working on, I would not want to give up either of these devices. Before we get any further, I have to plug the Dailytekk After Party, which is our podcast. It's available in any of your favorite podcasting platforms or apps, and it's also linked up down in the description, so make sure to check it out. So here's what I want to do. I want to start out by giving you some real-world examples from my own work life about how using both of these devices together can make life better. So just this last week, I think I looked over maybe 3 different contracts on my iPad Pro. What I did was I downloaded them from email or however I got them, stuck them into PDF Expert, which is a great app for this kind of a thing, and I highlighted stuff, I made some notes and annotations, basically just stuff that needed to be changed or whatever, and then shot that all over to my agent. Shout out Fabio. Working with business contracts in that way with the iPad, that's a pro thing to do, and I prefer doing it on the iPad Pro. Now, just this week on Monday, my brand new 16-inch MacBook Pro arrived, and I maxed out all the specs except for the storage, where I got 4 terabytes instead of 8. That's a whole different video right there, and I've got it to be a video editing beast. So when I'm editing like 200 plus minutes of final footage, of 4K footage every month, I think that's a pro thing to do. And I prefer absolutely right now to do that on the MacBook Pro. So even if you're not out there reviewing and signing a bunch of contracts or editing a ton of high quality 4K footage, what I'm trying to show is that each of these devices definitely have their own sweet spots where they really excel, even though there is a lot of crossover. Now, I obviously could mark up and collaborate on and sign a contract with the Mac, and we've all probably done that before. But to be honest, it's a lot less fluid or natural or even fun to do that on the Mac versus doing it on the iPad Pro with the Apple Pencil. And on the other hand, I could also edit a really great video on the iPad Pro, but at this point, it would be a lot more basic than what I could produce on the MacBook Pro for a lot of reasons that I'm not gonna get into right now. Now, as powerful as my iPad Pro actually is, it's still a lot lighter than my 16-inch MacBook Pro, which actually got a little bit bigger and thicker and heavier this year. So the iPad Pro is just like a no-brainer to stash in a backpack and hit the road. But when I'm using my Mac, I can make use of this colossal ultra widescreen monitor and see every app and aspect of my business on this crazy dashboard all at once, which is definitely something that I can't do on the iPad Pro. Now, when I'm shooting a video just like this in the studio, I can actually use my iPad Pro as a monitor to see what the camera is seeing and even to control it from wherever I'm sitting, and that's really handy. Or I can actually throw it on a floor stand and position it to read a script, for instance. So it's really versatile in terms of where I can put it and what I can do with it. Those are things I can't do with the MacBook Pro. But on my MacBook Pro, I can run actual, real, true, full Photoshop, not Photoshop Lite, like what is actually what came to the iPad Pro. And on top of that, I can run the full Adobe Creative Cloud suite of applications. So there's several that I make use of, and Final Cut Pro. And that's my preferred video editing app. Now, the iPad Pro has alternatives to those things for sure, but it's not quite the same. And then there's notes. Sometimes I'm in the mood to type those out, and I can do that on either device, right? But sometimes I'm in the mood to write those out, and maybe I need to do some sketches and stuff, or maybe access the more creative side of my brain, just get in a different mindset. And in that case, it's the iPad Pro that is my go-to. And the same thing honestly goes for design. I can design stuff on both devices, thumbnails, logos, t-shirts, social media stuff, the list goes on. But there are some times where it's more natural to design something on the Mac and more natural for me to design something on the iPad Pro. It's on a case-by-case basis. And natural, I think, is really the key word here, because you can do a lot of this stuff. There's a lot of that crossover on both devices, but to be able to choose, like, what feels the best? What am I most comfortable with? What am I going to be able to use better or excel with for whatever task? Having that option is a big deal. Now, of course, this video would be incomplete without mentioning Sidecar, which is the feature in macOS Catalina that lets you use your new enough, recent enough iPad as a wireless or wired second screen. And even with that super ultra wide monitor that you see on my desk, I still find Sidecar invaluable. So here's what my monitor configuration looks like right now. And as you can see, I've currently got a 3-screen setup happening. The MacBook Pro is under the monitor and the iPad Pro is to the left of the MacBook Pro. So whenever I'm at my desk now, I always have Sidecar running on the iPad Pro because it's great to be able to edit photos or videos using the ultra-wide and the MacBook screens and then still have my email or notes or Trello always open over on the iPad. And one of my favorite things ever is hovering over that little green dot up by the red and yellow dots and saying, send this window to the iPad. Now, even without the ultra-wide, it's still a game changer to so easily be able to use that second screen. So for video editing, I can have a preview of my footage over on the iPad and then the timeline over on my MacBook Pro, for instance. It's just incredible. All right, let's talk about portability because both of these machines are portable. And to be honest, there are times when I would take one with me over the other when I head out to do something. Because look, I think people think to themselves like, if I have an iPad Pro, that's gonna be the portable thing. And then maybe that's good enough when I'm mobile and I'll just have like a really beefy desktop for my desk, you know? And that's definitely one way to go. But here's what I would say, because both of these things are so portable, it doesn't have to be either or. Again, like maybe you need to start thinking of, I can easily fit both of these in my backpack and go to that meeting or to the coffee shop or travel with both and use Sidecar and just have a whole new experience. So I mean, if I need a change of scenery and I want to get out of the office and write up a script, I'm always gonna grab my iPad Pro. That's my go-to. But if I ever need to do any heavy video editing, I'm always gonna grab the MacBook Pro. And those two things are true whether I'm going to the coffee shop or the airport or working in bed. Like I've done that before. And actually my wife bought me this awesome like portable desk so I can like super lounge out sometimes in the bed. I'll link it up down below. If you wanna also work while laying down in bed in super comfort, it's really awesome. But recently though, just as often, whenever I go somewhere, I'll bring both. Because I can. And also, why not? If it's better to sign contracts or take handwritten notes and do some sketches with the iPad Pro, and it's better to do video editing or Lightroom, photo editing, whatever, on the MacBook Pro, why not do both? Why not have Sidecar everywhere, anywhere? Why not? So just to kind of wrap this up, before we get to the Q&A, I just want to say this. Obviously, the MacBook Pro is more expensive than the iPad Pro. So if you're going in to the purchase page on Apple's website, I think if you're a pro, and if you don't know if you're a pro, then you're probably not a pro. If you are a pro, you know that you need a certain X amount of horsepower, and you're in the pro market just by default. But if you're a pro and you're looking maybe for the MacBook Pro, I think it almost makes sense. I think it's a paradigm shift to consider an iPad Pro along with your purchase almost like a line item, an upgrade. Like, upgrade your GPU, maybe your storage, and yeah, get an iPad Pro to go with your MacBook Pro because it's the ultimate companion. I've really come to appreciate having CleanMyMac X installed over the last year. And you can bet that I'm gonna have it installed on the new 16-inch MacBook Pro. I love how it tells me things like battery draining apps, and it lets me see at a glance how much memory is getting used on the system, and it gives me the option to free up more with just one click. I'm also really appreciating the anti-malware feature, which is important as more and more Macs get sold and the Mac market becomes a bigger and more attractive target to bad actors. So whether it's malware, adware, or even ransomware, the database is regularly updated so the protection module always has your back. With a beautiful design and dozens of cleanup and tune-up tools in one convenient app, CleanMyMac X can help you delete system junk and hidden clutter, speed up your Mac. Now get this, it removes about 31 gigs of junk from the average Mac, so what are you waiting for? Give it a try using a link in the description. All right, so let's get into the Q&A. Not all of these are like straight up questions, but they all have like a question behind them. And the first question had to do with why would I even bother comparing an 11-inch iPad Pro with my new 16-inch MacBook Pro? Well, here's the thinking behind that for me. Like, why did I get this? Well, here's the thing. Here's my thinking. I like smaller form factors. Big capabilities, but smaller form factors. So for me, the new 16-inch MacBook Pro, it's the one that I've been waiting for a long time. I needed all that power that I could get from it. So already, when it talks about portability for that, I'm talking about like versus a desktop. Way more portable than desktop, yet very powerful. Whereas the 13-inch MacBook Pro is not going to do it for me. On the other hand, when it comes to the iPad Pro and the things that I do with it, I do want that to be smaller than the 12.9 inch. At least that was my thinking going into this. I'm liking Sidecar so much right now that it's very possible when the next iPad comes out, I'll get the biggest one there is, but we'll see. But for me, it doesn't have to be the biggest versus the biggest or the smallest versus the smallest. Everybody's different. The next question has to do with file transfers on the iPad Pro. Like, can it really handle it? How does it work? Yeah, you can do file transfers. The biggest thing for me, like let's say I want to transfer some stuff. It's great that there's a USB-C now, right? And you can do external drive support. That's awesome. But what I really hate though is that if I want to transfer some stuff, whether it's footage from a camera or files from a disk, you don't even get something as simple as like a progress bar or even a spinny wheel like you do on the Mac to let you know something's happening. And so that's a small thing that they really need to fix. And when they do, it'll be a big upgrade because I can sit there and let something import into the iPad Pro and I have absolutely no idea how long it's going to take. Am I almost done? Am I not even close? Should I go grab a coffee? Should I not? And so you can do it. It's doable, but you're kind of working a little bit in the dark right now. And that's a pain. Somebody asked, can you connect peripherals like a CD-ROM to an iPad? Honestly, that's something that never occurred to me. I see that it's got a couple of thumbs up, so there's some people out there wondering that. I just don't know. I assume no. I don't think so. But if anybody knows a better answer, let's comment it up down below and get an answer for everybody. Good old Apple Juice asks, what's it like using the iPad with an external display? Do I end up looking at the display more or the iPad? So here's the thing. This is one thing I really wish Apple would make better with the iPad experience. When I got the new Super Ultra Wide, there's a way to split that where you have like one device on one side and another device on the other. And so basically it's like using two 27-inch monitors. So when I hooked up the iPad to the 27-inch monitor on the right side of my display, number one, didn't take up all the space, right? It looks weird just because of the aspect ratio. So even if you just plug in a 27-inch monitor, like it's probably not gonna look that great. That's number one. Number two, a lot of applications just end up mirroring what's on the iPad display. And so you get a bigger version of what's on your iPad screen with that. But at the same time, unless you're using a mouse, what's the point? You can basically, you almost need to look down at your iPad to do most of your work. Now, it doesn't work that way for everything. I think something like Keynote, which not everyone's going to be using a whole lot hooked up like this, that doesn't just mirror your display, but I really wish that you could, plug in your iPad and put your screen, cover on and just forget about it. Plug it in and it's the computer now and powering your external monitor and work off of it that way. Like that would be the dream. We're not there yet. And so it's not something that I ever really use, but I really wish that I could. Like another aspect where that would be awesome, like another place where that would be really awesome is with gaming. And if it could recognize the size of the monitor and power it correctly with the aspect ratio and everything, it's plenty powerful, the iPad Pro, to be awesome for so many different applications for external monitors. You gotta imagine that's coming sometime soon. I mean, in the next couple years, basically for me, it couldn't come soon enough. Somebody talked about comparing the desktop class browser between both devices, the Mac and the iPad Pro. So here's the thing. The desktop class browser, as Apple puts it with Safari on your iPad Pro, it is way improved. Like I literally can go into Squarespace and edit my website now, which is great. That's like a dream come true. And I know other people are really excited about using Google Docs like fully in the browser and stuff. So the improvements are real. On the other hand, there's just some iPad quirks. Like one of the quirks is for YouTube, for instance, as a creator. I'm just giving you a personal example. I'm sure there's something comparable for whatever you do. But when I go into YouTube and I click on the community tab or something, it kicks me over to the YouTube app instead of letting me just access whatever I want to in the browser. And so sometimes how a request is handled can be a little bit frustrating and annoying still on the iPad Pro. Otherwise, it's great. Here's a really good question. Somebody said, what's it like to use each on your lap? And also, does the laptop get really hot under load? I'm actually glad that you brought this up because it is something that's very important because it's a way that you use these often. I guess the iPad, it really depends what stand you're using. So there's some that have like adjustable hinges that stay put, and there's some that don't. I've actually covered a bunch of this stuff. I'll try to link some up down below. If not, search for Dailytekk, Dailytekk, iPad Pro case or keyboard case, and you'll find all the old content. But it really, for the iPad, is going to depend on your case and the keyboard setup. I don't end up using the iPad on the lap all that often because, especially the 11-inch, the iPad Pro, it's so small. It's like you really got to squeeze your legs together and like to get it to balance. I don't know. It's just not quite as good. The MacBook Pro, though, you could use that all day, especially the 16-inch. It's like nice and big, and you can definitely use yourself as a stand a little bit better. And then you don't have to worry about what case I'm using or anything. No, it's just the screen is going to work at whatever angle, and it's great. It does, however, I notice, at least my 16-inch, it's all maxed out, get pretty hot if you're doing some real work on there. Not nearly as hot as something like a gaming laptop. The gaming laptop that I featured on the channel a while back, like couldn't even keep that on my legs because it would have been like a serious burn. So this one gets maybe on the verge, maybe not quite uncomfortably hot or warm, but it does heat up pretty good if you're doing like video editing or something like that. Here's a good question. Which device is better for media consumption? Okay, so maybe you're just talking about being portable around the house. Maybe you're talking about traveling, like being in a plane and watching a movie. Maybe if you're like a student in your dorm room and this is going to be like your main way to consume entertainment. That's a good question. I would say that the iPad Pro is amazing for watching content like YouTube, for sure. Disney Plus for me recently, Mandalorian, looking great. But you know, there's something to be said. And the reason it's so awesome is because it's great for its size. And the screen is great. The sound is good. But there's absolutely no comparing that to the new 16-inch MacBook Pro. The speakers. The screen is bigger. It's great. The screen's really nice. It's not even a 4K screen, technically, or anything. But it's very nice. But the speakers are crazy on the new 16-inch MacBook Pro. In fact, they're so good. That huge 49-inch super ultra wide monitor that you guys see on the desk, it has pretty decent speakers. People were pretty impressed with the speakers for monitor speakers with that display. But I switched the output back to my MacBook Pro when I got the new 16-inch because it's so much better. Smaller size device, you can fit bigger speakers in the LG screen because it's so big, but the sound is better on the 16-inch MacBook Pro. So what I'm saying is it's a better experience viewing media on the MacBook Pro if you can deal with that footprint and the size. Maybe it's going to be pushing it to have that on like this tray on the airplane or whatever, you know, because it's so big. And probably you're not going to use your speakers on the plane anyways. Just pop in the AirPods or whatever, or your noise canceling Bose if you're that kind of person. Have nothing against those, by the way. But yeah, it's just going to depend on the size, I guess. But if you're at home or if you're in your dorm room or something, there's no question the MacBook Pro is better because of that sound. Somebody actually says there's no reason to even compare these because the screen size is bigger, and that says everything on the MacBook Pro. Well, yeah, I mean, but everybody is different, and their usage scenarios are different. Like if you're going to read something, I would way rather grab the iPad Pro and hold that in bed or in a chair or something and read than read on this giant 16-inch MacBook Pro, for instance. So the answer is it depends. Somebody's question is, which one would I recommend more for a student who's also a business person? That's a great question. I guess it's going to depend what you're going to use it for, but when I hear business, I'm mostly thinking like emails, research, meetings, maybe like FaceTime or Skype type of stuff, getting those deals done, signing contracts, web surfing, being able to access your, sales tools, for instance. I would say basically all of that stuff can happen on an iPad Pro. It's when you really need that extra power. Or if you prefer like the keyboard, for instance, on the MacBook Pro, that's when you start looking at the MacBook Pro. But technically, can you run a business with an iPad Pro? Yes. You can do even like design stuff. You can check out how to be creative on the iPad Pro, my recent video that I did, and get some design done for your small business or whatever. I think clearly for a student, I think Ali is his name. I don't remember the full channel. I'll try to link it up down below. He has some really great videos on being a medical student, I think. I could have had this totally wrong. But using the iPad Pro for studying, and it looks like he's accomplishing great things. So I think absolutely, if you're a student and you are running a business, you can do it. And maybe it might be the best device for you. It's very mobile. You can take it to meetings and stuff really easily. Good battery life, travels well. For your trips to go visit clients, the iPad Pro could be like ideal for that. But if you need that heavy lifting, that's when you have to start looking at the MacBook Pro. And I would just also say too, like littler might be better around campus, because if you're walking through, to a bunch of buildings and up and down the stairs and whatever, and you need some get in and out of the backpack like really quick, you can't beat the iPad Pro. The MacBook Pro, especially the 16-inch, it's cumbersome. It's heavier and it's bigger and just a little bit trickier to deal with. All right, well, that's going to wrap it up for this video. Really appreciate the questions and your attention, even engaging here on the channel. Leave me your comments, your questions down below. If you have some more, we'll try to get those answered. Don't forget to check out the podcast, Dailytekk After Party, Dailytekk After Party. Look it up in Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts. It's everywhere. So check it out. It's linked up down below. You can check out our clips channel too, because a lot of the information in these videos, we make these long videos and not everyone has the patience or time to sit through them, and we kind of clip out the most interesting stuff and stick it on the clips channel so that it can kind of get out there and be a little bit easier to digest for some people too. So check that out. It's linked up down below. There's some really exciting stuff coming in the future. So just make sure that you're subscribed so you can stay on top of all that stuff. And I'll catch you guys in the next video. Later.